My recording thing just clicked out. Welcome to the afternoon session. We have three great speakers again. We'll be talking about some tribal knowledge from some tribal members, and it should be a good session to counterpoint the very science-heavy morning session that's more Western science and a little doom and gloom of some of the pests. So I'll pass it off to you, Connor McGee, another Paula tribal member. He's from Climate Science Alliance, and he will be our host for the afternoon session.
All right, thank you, Kurt, and Miyuyam, everyone. I hope everyone had a good restful lunch to get back, and I'm really excited because we have some great presenters on the panel today. Some references was made to Jolene's research in our last panel by Stacy. So Jolene will be able to share what Stacy was referring to for the prescribed fire is the GSOB intervention, and also Dr. Stan Rodriguez from the Santa Isabel Reservation, and as well as Christy Orozco from San Pasqual. And so I'll go ahead and let Jolene get started, and please just go ahead and introduce yourself as you start, Jolene, for all of us that don't know you yet and aren't familiar with your work. So please go ahead, and hopefully, and if anything happens, just signal me in the chat or something, and we'll try to cue in the other slides.
Sounds like a good plan. I appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, am I sharing?
Yes, we can all see your slides.
Perfect. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jolene Tam. I'm the Natural Resource Manager here at the La Jolla Indian Reservation. I'm also a Squaxin Island tribal member from the Pacific Northwest, and I am a graduate researcher studying under Dr. Mark Hoddle at the University of California, Riverside. Today, my project is researching indigenous and prescribed burns for management of the gold-spotted oak borer. The objectives of the research are also to honor traditional ecological knowledge. They're to reduce gold-spotted oak borer populations and wildfire risk, to identify landscape level management practices for gold-spotted oak borer, and to improve forest health. It's just a few objectives, but we're getting there. To honor traditional ecological knowledge, we need to remember those who were punished and imprisoned for burning. We have a long history, and highlighting that history is part of the growth and the integration into today's practices. Practicing and implementing traditional ecological knowledge help solve today's solutions and brings that culture into practice and perpetuity. Honoring traditional ecological knowledge reintegrates fire with the landscape, and using fire as a tool to increase harvests and decrease insects is also honoring that knowledge. California has a long fire prehistory. I like this quote in Kat Anderson's book that says that legends about destructive fires reflect the universal belief among California Indians that catastrophic fires were not a regular natural occurrence, but they were rather a rare punishment. And this reflects that the world that they knew was very different from the world that we know. There's been much research showing that California has a fire-dependent ecosystem. It's pretty much undisputable, except for some ecosystems. But oak trees in particular, and ponderosa pines, they're very fire tolerant. They need fire to be healthy. There are many historical accounts of California always being smoky, or it being referred to as the land of fire. The image on the left shows a angiosperm that has a fire return interval of about 5 years between 1770 and 1900s. Cultural burning started slowing down, after 1850, but even more so after 1900s, when they started practicing fire containment and control. There have been many people that have calculated the fire return intervals. 3 to 8 years has been mentioned a lot. The Forest Service calculated about 10 years. A lot of other researchers calculate between 5 and 12 years. So everybody is kind of hitting around the same number. It's under 10 years. It was a regular periodic occurrence. And there's been other research that has shown that it just wasn't possible that lightning started all those fires. For it to be regular and periodic like that, it had to be started by indigenous burning practices. And this falls in line with the practices that, and stories that were told down that survive today. So everything matches up. There's been many accounts of burning oak woodlands. One quote in particular that I wanted to highlight were that the ashes made the acorn trees grow better, and the ashes also killed the bugs that fed on the leaves, the bark, and the acorns. So they already knew this. And I just think it's amazing all the knowledge that was already there. And today we're looking for solutions to stuff that we already knew how to do, but we forgot. Charcoal, ash, and smoke have been used to cure and store food for thousands of years all around the world. Research has shown that this works because the charcoal, ash, and smoke injure the insect's exoskeleton, causing desiccation and death. The image on the right is smoked salmon. Because I'm from the Northwest, I have to put that smoked salmon in there. But I mean, the smoked salmon is preserved. Fish generally will spoil in a matter of days, but having that smoked salmon allowed it to keep for months. So it's super important to keep the insects away from the food, and the pathway to use that was through smoke and ash and charcoal. A lot of cultures buried their food within silos that were surrounded with ash, and that would keep the insects out. So there are a lot of accounts of this being used as a practice to keep food. Traditional ecological knowledge today is using that long history that we have and implementing it for today's problems. We know that controlled fire naturally thins forests and removes debris and dying trees, and it helps to remove those compartmentalized wounds that are harboring the insects and pathogens. By implementing the prescribed fire, we're going to do what was previously and historically done for the forest. So we're just re-implementing that knowledge and that practice and giving the oaks what they need, because they have been fire adapted for thousands of years. Implementing the prescribed fire produces the heat and the smoke and the ash and charcoal that damage the insects. So we're purposely and intentfully adding the fire to remove the debris and produce those things that are negative for insects. I'm attempting to integrate the traditional ecological knowledge into the GSOB research and management. And this is in large in part because I wouldn't know about GSOB if I hadn't started volunteering with the La Jolla Reservation and working with Chief Ruiz, and just, all these things coming together made this research happen. It wasn't any one idea. It was just putting all this knowledge together that this research took on a life of its own. If I go over or get close to the end, please let me know. My timer didn't start right. I think I set it for 14 hours, which isn't correct. So just keep me posted. Apparently I'll talk for hours sometimes, so we don't want that to happen. But back to this presentation. This picture here shows GSOB samples with wild rice. To give you an idea of how small they are, it's amazing how such little beetles can cause such widespread devastation. GSOB has caused tens of thousands of oak mortality across Southern California. It's scientifically known as Agrelus aurocutatus, and I think Stacy already mentioned that. Sorry, I missed that presentation. GSOB is a wood-boring buprestid jewel beetle that's invasive to California, that's been imported from the Sky Islands in Arizona. It was likely introduced via firewood imports and needs host oak trees for feeding and reproduction. The coast live oak and the black oak are its primary hosts. It can reproduce in the canyon live oak. Typically, when you're in a black oak dominated forest, it will attack those first. It doesn't cause mortality in Engelmann oaks. In Arizona oaks, the mortality rate is very low and it's not noticeable. GSOB is evident by bark bleeding and cracking, by shallow woodpecker foraging, by dead crowns and tree mortality, and D-shaped exit holes. GSOB has an annual life cycle, which we're going to use to try to take advantage of the most impactful prescribed burning. So in late May and September, the adults are feeding for about 2 weeks and then reproducing for about 6 to 8 weeks. It's estimated that a beetle lives in the field for about 6 weeks before dying, but during May through September, they can be found, although I've never seen one in the field. One day. So in June through October, the adult females deposit the eggs on the cracks and crevices on the outer bark. This egg takes about 2 weeks to hatch and bore into the wood. From about October through June, the larvae are feeding within the cambium. Down here on, between the red and the white, that's actually a larva. It's very flat and thin, so it fits nicely within that cambium region. And the cambium is actually the region of living cells, which consists of the outer xylem and then the inner phloem. And those are the regions that are actively bringing up water to the leaves and bringing those nutrients back down. So here we have next in January through March, the prepupa or the larvae constrict to turn into prepupa and are moving into the outer bark. And you can find them when you cut into an infested tree between January and March. Let's see, through April through August, they start to change into pupa. Mainly April through May is most of your pupa are going to be found. They kind of look like just a white miniature beetle, but they persist in this period for about a month, be turning into a form that looks more like an adult beetle. There's probably a bunch of stuff going inside the beetle, but it spends about a month resembling an adult beetle before it emerges. But the important part here is that through March through July, the pupil chambers are occupied. So we know when they're home, and we're going to be targeting the prescribed burns to affect GSOB while they're home and close to the surface. In March through July, the adult GSOB are emerging, leaving those D-shaped exit holes. The emergence probably happens fairly quickly. It probably takes about a day for it to chew its way out, puff out its wings, and for them to harden and turn black. But this is the overall life cycle. The pupil chambers are located just underneath the outer bark. I dissected about 20 samples of pupil chambers, and they're all 0 to 0.2 centimeters below the outer bark. GSOB exit holes are mainly found on the lower tree trunk, within the lower 6 meters, 18 feet of the tree, the majority of exit holes are found. I am finding that there is some differences between the different species of host oak trees. The attack pattern's a little bit different, but I can't really summarize that yet, so to be continued. But mainly speaking, especially in the coast live oak trees, the majority of exit holes are found near to the ground. Up until the tree dies or is dying, the exit holes can be found all the way up in the tree. So to test the efficacy of indigenous and prescribed burning on to GSOB management, we've been identifying infested trees. The La Jolla Tribal Fire Department has processed those trees into firewood or rounds. And then with the firewood, I'm heat treating that and monitoring the effects. Once we find that temperature needed to sanitize that firewood, we're going to apply that temperature data to pile burning and or understory burns. To test the heat treatment, let's see, ASONA, the Advancing Agricultural Opportunities, Science Opportunities for Native Americans, is a scholarship organization through ACES. They provided funding for me to buy an oven. So I've been testing everything in this next year coming up to make more samples tested. We'll be testing up at the Forest Service Riverside Fire Lab, the Pacific Southwest Research Station. But this allowed me to get a lot of preliminary data this year. So I thought that was really cool. And it's really neat that, the La Jolla tribe allows me to do this research on site here. To test the firewood, I am inserting thermocouple probes into the bark and into the core of the firewood and recording the temperature data and humidity as the firewood heats up. And monitoring and making sure that all portions of that firewood reach 60 degrees Celsius for 60 minutes. There's only been a couple of cases where the bark took longer to reach that core temperature than the core. But I mean, coast live oak has really, really thick and wet firewood. So that could probably explain why that is. In this chart, this upper line is the temperature of the oven. These 4 lines close together are the temperatures of the bark and the core of the firewood. And I've made sure that they've all hit that 60 degrees Celsius for 60-minute mark. I've collected the treated wood, and I have also put aside some untreated wood, which I call the controls. I've placed the wood into a vinyl mesh bag, which contains all the beetles after emergence. This data is also going to help the tribe to salvage biomass because we have a lot of it up here. And we need something to do with all this wood that we're cutting down. It's just, there's so much of it, and it could be used for heating, and it is used for heating for tribal members and for campground visitors. But to find a way to do it safely where many people can implement the safe distribution of wood that was infested, this temperature data is aiming to help support. So for example, on this picture on the lower right, we have a piece of firewood. It's about 10 inches by 10 inches, but this piece alone had about 23 exit holes in June and July. It's just one piece of wood can infest a whole region. Most of the other firewood pieces didn't have this many. 1/3 of all the emergence in my controls came from this piece of firewood. So it just goes to show that a little bit can go a long way. All this firewood was from one tree. But yeah, it's quite interesting how some wood is more, or some areas are more infested than other areas on a tree. To test the prescribed burning, we're also inserting thermocouple probes into the core of into the center of the bark. We want to monitor the cambium region and make sure that it's not reaching critical temperatures while the outer firewood is reaching temperature. So we're going to be monitoring the temperature, applying the prescribed burning, and taking that fire data so we can reproduce those test burns.
Jolene, if I could catch you on time there, I'm sure we'll be able to carry the conversation, but I know that Christy Orozco is in a little bit of a time crunch. So if it'd be okay if I pressed a pause really quick. But thank you so much for everything that you shared so far, especially hitting in on the history behind prescribed burn and all the work that's gone on scientifically for generations and generations here in California, and the burden that sort of folks have had to carry from being prosecuted from that. I really want to thank you for that. And of course, we're always going to be eagerly waiting at the edge of our chairs for your research to continue and come out. So thank you very much. And I wanted to transition quickly to Christy Orozco, who's going to be presenting next. Christy does have some things she does need to get to, so she may be leaving us before we get to our Q&A, but I'll turn it over to you, Christy. Thank you.
Thank you, Connor, and thank you everyone at the Climate Science for inviting me here today. Can you hear me good? Is the audio good, Connor?
Yeah, you're good. You're coming through clear.
Okay, great. I apologize for not having audio visuals, but I do have a couple of images. If Connor is able to put those up, we can use those just to navigate a little bit what we're going to be talking about. But I just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Christy Orozco. I've been working with like Indigenous resource protection for a while now, and right now I'm pursuing a master's degree at Scripps Institute of Oceanography in marine biodiversity and conservation, so that I can add the marine and coastal knowledge, add that to my terrestrial knowledge that I did in my undergrad. And this fall I'll be teaching and co-teaching community ethnobotany at Cal State San Marcos, and also providing some native plant workshops at UCSD. So with that, I just want to talk about TEK, traditional ecological knowledge, real quick. I just wanted to make an analogy so that people can get an idea of how I've been thinking about this, because as we begin to decolonize the institutional systems around us and decolonize our methodologies, we're realizing that traditional ecological knowledge is a extremely undervalued worldview that's science-based and has a lot of applications to climate change strategies for Indigenous people. And so I think that when I talk about traditional ecological knowledge, it's extremely advanced science, and I honor all the practitioners that have in some cases sacrificed a lot just to carry on these ways of knowing and these ways of learning and teaching. And so I want to be thankful for all that's come before us, that's made this possible, this moment possible. And so when I talk about traditional ecological knowledge, people say, well, no, like, why would why is that so much different than Western knowledge or book knowledge, the way that we've been taught? And I like to explain, like, for me, there's a couple analogies, but just a brief one is like, if there's a mother that's known her child their whole life, and they're like, 40, 50, 60 years old, and they say, oh, I know Anna, or, that's my daughter. And so then they say, And then somebody that meets them for the first time and they say, oh, I know her. And so if you say, oh yeah, I know these oak trees because you know them by name. But then if you ask somebody with a deep traditional ecological knowledge within their culture about that individual oak tree, it's a whole vast volumes of information. So two people can say, yes, I know that oak tree. Yes, I know that oak tree, but it's two completely different ways of knowing. So it's knowing something, learning its name, and then also the whole, and then that other whole side that I'm trying to make the analogy about. So anyways, that's that. It's an endangered and knowledge base that needs to be conserved and recorded and documented at all times possible, because it is disappearing just as fast as our ecosystems. And in Southern California, we have the most biodiverse county in the contiguous nation. And so our riparian habitats are extremely, extremely important to us. They allow for the cleansing of water so that animals can proliferate, and therefore our culture and our people proliferate. And the plants that are in these riparian habitats are very essential to our cultural survival. Southern California cultural diversity is one of the most critically endangered cultural areas on Earth, because we're losing everything at such a rapid rate that our culture depends on. So these the integrity of riparian zones and the oak tree woodlands and all these other amazing habitats that we have from the coast to the desert here in Southern California, it's all interdependent on the immune system of the ecosystems as they interact together. And the root systems and the soil composition, the microbes and the microorganisms that are underground are extremely important and undervalued in our current methodologies of doing environmental monitoring and data analysis and health monitoring. It's extremely important that we start looking at protecting all these recharge areas and the root systems, for example, of the oak tree. The oak tree will continue extending its taproot until it finds water, and only then will it begin to mature. Then it will, through an electrical information and communication systems that's aided by a fungal network that adds 70% to its root surface area. It's able to chemically exchange information to all the plants around it. And in turn, there's nutrients transported and shared. There's water that's transported and shared. So above ground, an oak tree sustains hundreds of species, and subterranean underground, the oak tree sustains thousands of species, if not more. It's probably more. And so by protecting the water resources that flow into the riparian zones, and to keep these amazing ecosystems sustained, we need to make sure that water continues to be able to flow into our watersheds, so that the trees and the plants and the soils and the microbes can do their job to filter out the pollutants, and they can create the cool habitats that the fish need to and our sacred fish, our sacred turtles, our sacred animals, bugs, insects, birds, reptiles, amphibians. We could talk all day about all the animals that are important to us and culturally significant species that depend on these watersheds and these ecosystems. But what we need to know is that it's extremely endangered because water is being pumped out at an alarming rate. The water is being diverted into dam systems that's being delivered and not being recharged into the water system. These aquifers and water systems took thousands and hundreds of thousands of years to develop to where they're at today. And they're being depleted at a rate that's unfathomable to our ancestors. We need to come up with strategies that are leveraging technology and other capacities so that we're going to have to do double duty to protect all these areas. The oak trees, it's devastating when I go past areas that our family traditionally gathers from, and I see these individuals that I know that are hundreds of years old are passing away very quickly, and it's very devastating. It's like losing relatives, and if we continue to lose the oak trees, we will have to have mourning ceremonies in our community to recover and from this, because this is such an important resource for us, our food source that keeps us having a healthy lifestyle free from diabetes if we eat our traditional foods. And so I just want to encourage everyone to, we can all do what we can in our capacities. That's all we can do is in our own capacity is to maximize our efficiency and actions, leverage the support that we can get from others and technology and other things so that we can do our best so that our children and grandchildren also have a chance to protect these resources. We want them to be here for them to protect too, and not be gone as so many other species have vanished from our ecosystems. But we have to keep monitoring it and maybe even have an alert or a strategy for when we get to a critical point. And maybe we need to start working on that in subgroups about our emergency and our contingency plans for when if some devastation happens, how are we going to recover our sensitive species, our culturally important species, and all of our keystone species and everything else. Everything's important. So I just want to thank you all for inviting me, and encourage everyone to just keep going forward. Just keep, if we can plan it and believe in it, then it can happen. So I want to thank Connor and Will and everyone else, and I'll stay for questions online if you guys have any. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Christy. Thank you. Really important in sharing your epistemological and ontological position when caring for oaks, and that strong relationship. Thank you for sharing that in your family's connection and the call to action, really, right? And I know that it's the same throughout the state when we're visiting our stands and we see emergency declines, right? And so thank you for really pointing that out and sharing that with us. And Hauke, Dr. Stan, are you there? I'm going to be turning it over to Dr. Stan Rodriguez, and he's going to close us up with our final presentation, and then we could all circle back together and have a discussion and share some Q&A.
Right.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Okay, peña ma tipe cham. Stanwin na chuhinya makopa with konam. Pele helikoi nya we nura nyepa matayum. Ya kanar nya akakwe mamblemara muya ya senyao nya sentai kopar wispar ya waps wispar. So I just want to say good afternoon, everyone. My name is Stan Rodriguez. I'm from the Santa Isabel Band of the Ipai Nation here in San Diego. And it's an honor for me to come and speak with all of you today. And I just wanted to acknowledge the two speakers that went before me, Jolene and Christy. Thank you for the information that you put out, coming from, the different aspects, like the different facets of this problem, and for us to take a look at this, not just from one lens, but many lenses on what is going on in our community, in our areas, and what can we do about this. So when we talk about the oak and this problem with the bark beetle, first of all, what does the oak mean for our people? And it goes back, it's in our creation story. We have a relationship, a symbiotic relationship with everything that is on this land, the land, everything. We are part of this. And there's stories that talk about the oaks, and they fought against the Torrey pine and the pinyon pine, pushing the Torrey pine to the west and the pinyon pine to the east until they stopped fighting. They had a talk and they decided everybody was going to stay in a certain area and then there would be peace. And that's why the Torrey pines, thrive right on the coast, and the pinyon pines in the high desert, and the oak stay in the middle. So with that said, many times our people, I'm not going to say our people, but people in Western society, no, not many times, almost all the time, people in Western society have marginalized us as Native people and discounted our own organic science, our own epistemology. This is true when we talk about the oaks. Many times they've looked at it as a trash tree and nothing to be concerned about. When we talk about our own people and the importance of oak to our people, I remember the elders telling me, see all these oaks over here, see these groves of oaks. Our families, our shamuks, our clans planted groves of oaks. We all knew which shamuk, which clan was taking care of which grove. And we always supported that. We always honored that. We knew where those family boundaries were. And this, the oak tells a story. It tells a story that goes back thousands upon thousands upon thousands of years. The oak has been with us through climate change, through many different things that have happened. The oak has stayed with us. And yes, I like what you were saying, Jolene, about when we did the chomohui, when we did the burnings, the controlled burnings. And there's recordings of when the Spaniards first came. They said they could smell smoke off the coast. They could see smoke. And when they came onto the lands, they talk about the lands having a park-like setting. And they said, well, it seems like people have been taking care of this area. Duh. Yeah, well, our people do. And it's not just past tense, because when we talk about these things, when we talk about the oaks, when we talk about the acorn harvest, it just wasn't done. It's done today. I know Christy and I, we talk about, when Kupiha, when the fall comes, and we go with the acorn go for the acorn harvest, take our families, the stories that are told, all these things that happen during this thing. This is part of who we are, our traditional cycle, our relationship with the land. And we take care of the oaks take care of us. We all take care of each other. So what is happening now, not just with the bark beetle, but also with the way that, the water is being used. When I liked what you said, Christy, about, discharging. How is that going to be replenished? Our people our fire science, it is a fire science that is now, and it's not just the Qumran, but all up and down California. All of our peoples knew about fire science and how to work with the land, how to be part of this. All these things are very important for our people. And what can be done to regenerate that? We take a look, and a number of us have gone out, like to the Cuyamacas or other places, and see all this debris out there that for more than 100 years has been just piling up. When our people would do things, with the controlled burns, burn it down, and minimize the danger of fire from lightning strikes. We had that, but our people, and some of our people still do that today. I've seen people do that on various reservations, Manzanita, San Pasqual, San Isabel, a number of different reservations. Individuals who have done that around their house. And it's not just taking care of the oak trees, but also burning down areas so that other plants that one needs to harvest, such as the sumac, using that for baskets, basket making, or some of the hapap, the wild potatoes, other types of things. So this is part of our own organic science that people still practice today. It had to go underground, just like our religion had to, until the Freedom of American Indian Religion Act was passed in August 11th, 1978. But this science that we have is important, not just for the care of the environment, but for it to be continued. This science has, it's accumulation of thousands upon thousands of years of experience that our people have here in this land. We are no strangers to climate change. We have seen that. We have village sites that are under the Pacific Ocean right now that speaks to a time when the ocean was farther back. We have fish traps, rock fish traps that are out in Imperial County that speak to a time when there was a big lake there, a huge lake there. So our people know about these things. Our people, have this information. And I think it's important that, we continue to work with our science, with these sciences, so that we can address many of the issues that are going on right now. I remember some of the elders would say, yeah, the mayumda will hui. They said, so when you use that smoke, it will, it will clean off these bugs. It will kill them. It will take care of the trees. So, and the other thing about the fire, what else it does is it burns the brush around the trees. Why do you think we want to do that? Because when we go harvesting, it's a lot easier to harvest the acorns. And also that ash goes in its nutrients for the ground. So our people did all these things. We had that kind of a relationship, and we still do, not as much as before. But these are some of the things that, in my opinion, we need to bring back, because this has kept our people not just surviving, but thriving for untold thousands of years. And this knowledge is important for all of us, and not just, for the trees, but also for the land, the area that we're from. We are the original inhabitants of here. We are the original inhabitants from here. We're here today, and we're going to be here tomorrow. So I think when we let people know that, when we talk about these things, it is very, very important. We're not gone. We're here. And while we're here, it is our responsibility to take care of this land, to be part of this land. This land is our holy land. You hear about people talking about Jerusalem and all that. Well, maybe that's their holy land, but this is our holy land. Our creation story talks about this area. Our creation story talks about the mountain, the ocean, the desert, all these different things. So I just wanted to share a few things about that, and thank you all for the work that you're doing. And last thing I want to say is, at Kumeyaay Community College, right now we are the only operational tribal college in California that offers an accredited associate's program. And some of the classes that we teach are like food gathering up in in the various areas. And we have a Kumya Humanities course that talks about, what we can use. And, we make the traditional acorn storage baskets, the hakwin. In the Kupihau, the autumn, we go and harvest the acorns. We teach people how to make shawi. Many other people call it wiwish, or other different things. And the oak tree, the bark can be used to make a paste that you put junkus grass in to use as a black dye, so that you can use that for baskets. The limbs can be used to make cradle boards. They can also be used for rabbit sticks. It can use to make bows. That bark can be boiled, used to make a mouthwash. All these different things that come from the oak tree. It's a medicine for us. It takes care of us, and it is our responsibility to help that oak to take care of that too. So I just wanted to share that. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for letting me participate in this and share. Yeah, thank you.
Hello, Dr. Stad, thank you so much. That was very powerful words you shared. I really appreciate it. Kind of expected it too, though. You're always such a great leader when it comes to these conversations, and you bring all of your knowledge and experience at the forefront of your words. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I just want to encourage everyone, if you'd like to, just drop questions into the chat. If there's a direct question that anyone would like to share with the panelists, now would be a good time. You could raise your hand, or trying to see if I could see that.
Connor, there's a couple of questions in the chat. Somebody asked to see, I think it was UV asked to see Jolene's results.
I don't have much results right now. I have preliminary results. I can share those. I think it was just on the last slide that I was. So we've only done one prescribed campfire, prescribed burn. Just don't tell anybody. So this is post-treatment. We have the stump pre-treatment, and then this is post-treatment. I counted all the exit holes around the tree, and I came up with about 5. I am not sure exactly which ones are there before. I have photographs, but I need to come up with a better method for documenting the holes that are already on the tree versus the holes that appear after the emergent season. So it's a lengthy process. You can't mark it with crayons like you would mark other exit holes because the fire chars it. So this is just preliminary. I excavated about 1 or 2 square feet of this tree, and I pulled out 47 larvae. So the stump was highly infested, and for it to only have 5 exit holes is pretty astounding because the back half of the tree wasn't burned. But hopefully by next summer, I'll have results that I can share with you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jolene. Just trying to catch up and see if there's any more questions in the chat. And if not, I could share some that we got back from our survey results. Oops. Okay, so did tribes control the disruption of the soils beneath the trees, remove competitive species, redirect water, and other things? I think that question is really geared towards, like, I know that we talk a lot about prescribed burn for the management of oak woodlands, and I think this question is more about like what sort of other practices were put in place that would be beneficial, if I'm interpreting that correctly, or if you see another interpretation of that question.
Is the question asking like, so to keep the soils in place to prevent topsoil loss, if you do periodic and regular controlled burning, you're not burning whole watersheds, so you're not having that high rate of topsoil loss. So as you're doing those cultural burning events, you're only burning like narrow strips at a time, and that causes plants to always be holding the soil in place. And the burned areas, they don't burn all the way down into the soil, they just burn over the top, leaving the base of the grasses to grow back. So it's not really causing a destructive soil event. And I've read that in certain areas, the people would pull out the weeds that they didn't want and replant the seeds that they wanted. I'm not sure what kind of scale that occurred on, but I'm sure with the prescribed burning, that had a large role in the species that dominated that area, because they had to be native, and then that had to be that plant's favorite area for it to persist in. So creating those conditions which make the conditions for that plant happy, it all falls hand in hand with landscape level management.
Excellent. And Dr. Stan or Christy, or would you like to comment on that as well?
Yeah, this is Christy. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I've had classes where the top classes where the students would say, well, what's the difference between what, indigenous burn practices compared to what's going on today, that there's these fires going on, so that must be okay. And the response to that is it's not okay. It's not a natural balance in this conditions that we're experiencing. There's extreme drought conditions. The fuels are extremely dry because of the fire management practices that have been implemented. And excuse me. And so there is also the issue of so when those fires burn under extreme heat conditions, as well as they are right now throughout California and Northwest, then you get soil temperatures and get above a point that's unhealthful for the regenerative properties that happen at natural burns and more natural settings that aren't these heavily stressed conditions that we're experiencing now. So now what we're seeing when we go out to these burnt areas is the species that are traditionally able to recover, that are known to have fire resistance, are unable to. The temperatures have damaged the root system, as well as the topsoil that is so important because it has such a vast seed bank. The topsoil gets to a temperature where it makes a lot of the seed content unviable. And so when it scorches to those temperatures, rather than the natural germination process that it would trigger under a more controlled burn at a different time of the year, it's being burnt at these extreme events, and therefore the ecology is going to be having a very, very hard time recovering under these conditions.
Great, thank you, Christy. And Dr. Stan, would you like to add anything there, or we could switch to another question if not?
Sure. Just real quick, just wanted to say, Chrissy, what you're talking about, and we've talked about this before, is the difference between a low level and a high level burn. And also what plays a part in this, because of it's extremely dry, it's a tinderbox. And the other problem with that is the water management or lack of water management. There's been the fire practices, prior to these, catastrophic burns have been horrendous. Same thing with water practices. So you have tinderbox conditions in the hills, in the mountains, and what is going to happen? With a low level burn, it activates many of the seeds that we use for things like hatapaup or sacred tobacco. That's fire activated. Also, some of the grains are fire activated too. So this is where it's important to be able to distinguish between a low level burn and something that's catastrophic. So I just want to share that. Thank you.
No, thank you. And Jeannie,
Also,
step in.
could I add one thing, Connor? Wanted to add one thing to that. How Stan was explaining that that these conditions, it's really difficult to recover. I think to be proactive, anybody in their capacity that has the ability to, put seeds into a seed bank for their reservation or in their community or, within their resources, or to begin to encourage propagation, to keep the DNA and the biodiversity viable. And also another just thought about the difference between the fires now and before, when there were traditional burning practices, is that a long time ago we got our energy source from the environment, from this dead wood and so forth, so that there was minimal fuels, because that was our energy source. And today we use an energy source of electricity, and that gets and that is also a fire hazard. So there's also a cultural shift that happened at the same time as a lot of other things that's applied all this pressure to these ecosystems. So I just wanted to factor in and that issue also, is that fuel was used for a lot of cultural uses day to day. And today we get energy from the electricity. So just wanted food for thought.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you, Christy. And I want to give Jeannie Seppin the opportunity to speak. Jeannie, I see your hands up.
I had my hand up.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, thank you. Sorry. Yes, I just wanted to thank them for all those things that they're saying. And also that's what the example of that is. Cuyamaca. Cuyamaca was absolutely destroyed because the state had a policy of wilderness. They wanted to keep the area as a wilderness, which hadn't been done in the thousands of years since native occupation of the state. And the land responded with brush and a big mess, and you couldn't even pick acorns by the time, the few years before that. It was very, very difficult because of the growth of the brush under the trees. So when that burned, it burned with a heat that went all the way to the roots of those plants. The roots just burned way down into the ground, and it was white ash everywhere. It was just, the land turned gray. And when the winds came, it blew everything away. So that not even the ash stayed behind to renew the earth. It was a very sad thing to see. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeannie. And Nori, please feel free to comment.
Yeah, I thought, Jolene, I thought that was really interesting that the peak time to hit them up is that March to July. Is that not our rainy season now? I somehow remember reading that there were Kusi specialists who were paying attention to the rains and when the rains were coming, because you had to burn in relationship to those rains. So March to July is really nice for us, isn't it?
It is, and so most of the accounts of cultural burning that I've read, the burning took place later in the year before the rains came, because the rains would come and put the rest of the fires out. But with today's burning, we only have narrow windows. So burns can be done in the late fall before the rains, if the conditions are right, wind speed, temperature, cloud layers, all those good things. But burns can also be done in the spring too, just as everything dries out before everything gets really hot. So I'm thinking that a burn will be more efficacious in the spring, but a fall burn will probably be effective too, just because it chars the outside of the trees. It damages the outside of the outer layer of bark where the pupil chambers are built, and it produces the ash, which dry out, insects. So it may be a variety of factors, but if we apply the fire when the pupil chambers are occupied, we might see a more immediate decrease in reproduction. But that's what the experiment is hopefully going to test.
That's cool. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, great. If I don't see any more questions in the chat, I think, Kurt, we have a little bit more time, right, to continue our discussion?
Yeah, we can keep going. I have this book till 3, so we've got plenty of time. Whoever
Okay,
wants
great.
to ask questions, chat.
One of the questions that we had in our survey was, what are the land conservation priorities for tribes? If there's anything you'd like to share outside of what we've already discussed. And Stan's signing off right now. He has I believe he has a class at Cal State San Marcos that he has to go teach. So, well, thank you, Stan. If you can still hear us, I really appreciate it. Noshun Lovik. It was great having you, and till the next time.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Looking forward to seeing all of you soon. Take care.
Bye.
Oh, and is Christy still there too? I know that. Oh yes, she's. So other than that, if there's any other questions that anyone has, or if there's any specific things you'd like to ask Christy or Jolene, please feel free. And again, tomorrow we will be discussing in more detail some of the climate impacts and what the temperature and precipitation models look like for oak species. And we'll be hearing about the research that's being done at UVA Renteria's lab at San Diego State, as well as from Dr. Megan Jennings, who I saw is joining us, and Dan Kane from the Scripps Institution of Oceanography. He has really good downscaled modeling for our region. So those questions we could talk about a little bit more tomorrow too. And let's see, Ryan Krantz is asking, how can we advocate for these traditional fire management practices? It's a good question. And I think that Jolene's probably gonna have a lot to say here.
Where to begin?
Yeah.
So yes, we need lots of help in advocating for traditional fire management practices. Although there is a split divide between cultural burning practitioners and prescribed burning practitioners that do it with cultural burning in mind on Indian lands. One needs regulation, the other doesn't. I don't know how to make the one that doesn't need regulation to happen safely. I've been focusing a lot of my efforts on implementing prescribed burning within reservation lands with that cultural burning in mind. So those are two very different things, but using prescribed fire on trust lands, it has to fall under the BIA. And with that, there's a whole bunch of regulations. We had a wonderful meeting with the NRCS and BIA this morning, outlining all the regulatory procedures that we need to go through in developing these requirements within your land management, the integrated resource management, fire management, and forest management plans. I would say if you want prescribed burning to happen on your reservation for your specific resource objectives, the best way would be to start working towards implementing those regulatory requirements that will support the prescribed burning. It's not that exciting, but it is very helpful, and it is for the protection of the tribe. I'm working to outline a list that has all that information together in one place. At the same time as the paperwork and regulations are being developed, we also need to support tribal development, firefighter, and cultural burning practitioner to have those certifications to be on the ground with the fire departments as they're deploying these prescribed fire projects. And the big difference between prescribed fire today and yesterday is that prescribed fire today has to happen usually, after sunrise and be done before sundown. So that's a day window. If it's not done by a certain time, it could be deemed out of control because it was supposed to be done at the end of the day. We don't have the conditions in Southern California to support week-long burns. In other places they do, but because of this difference, we have to have prescribed burns implemented with the help of fire departments to contain and control an area that has had fire excluded for over 100 years, because there's so much fuel on the ground and that potential for that fire to escape is so high, but not if done in certain conditions that facilitate burning. But we still have to have the resources on the ground to prepare for that event. So having your administrative plans in place, having your people trained to get tribal burn bosses qualified. We've only got one or two in Southern California. I'm not sure about the two. I know we have the one. We have others who will come down to Southern California to help, but we need a local supply of tribal burn bosses. So we got that. And then we need to prepare the land for the fire that's altering the fuel structure. That's planning for the area, what you want the plants to be after the fire. Like for instance, in a oak understory burn, we have to cut down a lot of the bushes and trim up the canopy so the fire travels on the ground and doesn't get into the canopy and cause a canopy fire. So, and we have to reduce the amount of dead fuel to keep down the heat of that fire and keep it into control. So that's really 3 separate actions. You got to prepare the land, you got to train the people, and you got to get the paperwork in place. And I think there's actually one more major section that I'm forgetting right now, but all those things support prescribed fire. The CSA has been doing a lot of work to help implement the training to Southern California. I guess the best bet would be to open that discussion with the tribal council and the general councils around, and just feed them information and start learning, so you figure out what it takes to implement what kind of projects that would benefit your community.
Great, thank you, Jolene. And yeah, you stayed within the lanes there without spilling too much over on kicking the shins of any of these regulatory agencies.
They were really nice today, so I got to be very nice too.
Oh, great, great. That's good to hear. And Ryan as well, there is movement within NRCS. They're rewriting their policies around prescribed fire and cultural burning and what they will fund. So they're in a very active process of rewriting that and sort of taking away the sort of friction in the paperwork pipeline. And a lot of that's through state certification, CAL FIRE being able to work with tribes, et cetera. And as Jolene was pointing out, really the largest hurdle on federal trust land that's mainly under tribal control is the BIA and the liability issues associated with them signing off on the permits. But like Jolene said, she had a great conversation this morning, so things are really hopeful, and you could tell by reading the writing on the wall that the change is coming. There's just a sort of a glut of call to action so that we can control our fuels and manage our land and steward our oaks better. And I know that we are about at time, and like Kurt said, we can spill over if you'd like, but if not, I know that Kurt was planning on transitioning to sort of a closeout for our first day. If it seems like a good time to do that, Kurt.
Yeah, I mean, if there's more questions, you can always reach out. This will be available hopefully on our YouTube channel, the Paul Environmental Department YouTube channel. And then most of the speakers are pretty readily available. You can reach out. We can get you in touch if you have major questions, burning questions. But kind of the close of the day, I think, as somebody who I've been doing this Riparian workshop for like 6 years, I mentioned, well, 6 different ones. It's been more than 6 years because of the pandemic and whatever. But I work for a tribe. I'm not tribal. My background is Western science. I'm a white guy from Ohio, but I've been out here and having fun, and I love it. And I think for a lot of those people who actually want to make a difference and make a positive impact in this restoration and habitat protections, it's the Western science is really great at explaining what's happening inside of something, like inside the tree. We can get, exactly the chemical formulas for the reactions, but it's really hard at explaining kind of why and the larger lives of these things, where it's just where a lot of the traditional knowledge and indigenous knowledge around the world comes in, of the people that live there that kind of know, you can take the science and say a tree is doing this, but kind of why is that larger question that a lot of us don't have the answers to. And I think sometimes, it's the best people that know are the people that have lived here for 10,000 years, 20,000 years, longer around the world. So I hopefully people that aren't tribal employees, aren't tribal members, aren't familiar, had a good experience this afternoon and dip their toes into kind of how we can respectfully get those people involved and a seat at the table. And for everybody who just wanted to learn about trees, we had a great talk this morning about just kind of the diseases and what's going on with the actual trees themselves. And then tomorrow, back at 10 a.m., we'll be talking about climate change. And then our afternoon session at 1 will be the restoration, which will hopefully bring kind of all these ideas together. So thank you, and feel free. I'll be on for a few minutes. So if anybody sticks around, has questions specifically about kind of what's going on tomorrow and whatever, I'll be here. But thank you to all our speakers. It was great. And yeah, I'll make this available, recording, and hopefully, be able to reach out to some of the speakers. And if you're here and you're just kind of learning, you're always welcome to reach out to me and our other hosts, and we can get you some knowledge. And that's what we want to do. Make the world a little bit better for trees. Thank you.
Thank you, Kurt.
Thanks, Kurt.